Good morning, everyone. Let's start our discussion. So today, UPSC has conducted just now. We are done with GS paper 1 questions. Our GS paper 1 test was over. As we know, GS paper 1 contains history, society, and geography. Let me quickly get you into this system of how UPSC used to ask GS paper 1 questions earlier. How was the paper today compared to last year and last but 1 year? We'll also discuss about how we have to prepare in future going with the trend of the last 2 years or 3 years. So welcome to this session, UPSC Mains 2022 analysis of GS paper 1, history, society and geography. Now this is the 3 sections that you have in GS paper 1, right? So how UPSC asks the questions in GS paper 1 is, earlier it used to follow one trend, that is the first 3 questions or 4 questions will be from history. The next 4 questions, 4, 5, 6, 7 will be from geography. 8, 9, 10 questions will be from society. This is the trend in 10 marker. All these first 10 questions are 10 markers. In the next 10 questions of 50 markers, 11th question, 12th question, 13th question is from history. 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th is from geography. 18th, 19th, 20 is from society. Which means earlier UPSC used to ask from history 6 questions, from geography 8 questions, from society 6 questions. At times, what it used to do is, it also used to change this combination. The society questions are only 6 questions that they are going to ask. This is restricted. They didn't change this much in the last 3 or 4 years, but what they have done the change in the last 4 years is, at times they used to ask 7 here, 7 here, or 6 here, 8 here, 8 here, 6 here. This used to be the combination. But from the last 2 years, the question paper used to be 7, 7 in this way, and 6 questions are from society. But this year, if you have gone through the new question paper, they have asked again the same trend, 6 questions from history, 8 questions from geography, and 6 questions from society. So this is the combination, 6, 8, 6. So more or less you can say that one thing, 7, 7, 6 or 6, 8, 6 is the trend which UPSC is following as far as history, geography and society is considered. Now why I said this in the initial slide itself is, whenever a person is writing a 15 marker or 10 marker, what would be the strategy of a student who is trying to write the answer within 7 minutes or within this 9 minutes of available time? What they will do is, immediately they will start writing all the questions which are related to history at one go, and then they will come to geography, they will complete it at one go, and then they will go to society questions. They solve all the 6 questions of society at one go. This makes us to concentrate our mind entirely on that particular subject for that duration of 40 minutes or 45 minutes or 50 minutes exclusively, so that the subject sensitive words will be on our brains. The second thing is, there will be key terms or the key data that we memorize for one time, that can be substantiated for the entire answers. Rather than writing it plainly, students do go ahead by writing with this strategy. First they complete the section that is very favorable to them, maybe society, maybe geography, maybe history. They take these components and then they go ahead with writing. So this is one strategy that we have to keep in mind if you want to write 20 questions, because of the limited time that we have in the examination hall. The only thing that we have to do is, you have to complete the important section that you feel very comfortable to finish it, and then move to the next comfortable subject. Say this is the first thing. This will be applied for GS paper 1, GS paper 2, GS paper 3 similarly. The trend won't change, right? This is the thing that I wanted to say. Now let's quickly enter into this component, the history component. Now if you look at this history component, this is the syllabus that UPSC used to ask, as he has given in its syllabus component, Indian heritage and culture. We all know this. Salient features of arts and architecture, literature. This is from ancient and medieval India. They are cultural components. The second one is modern India, right from the so-called arrival of the British until the exit of British. Next one is how the freedom struggle has happened in this era. And next is post consolidation and reorganization within the country. This is what they used to ask, and this is the syllabus that they have given in history component. Whereas history also contains history of the world, which includes events from the 18th century, right? industrial revolutions, world wars, redrawal of national boundaries, colonization, decolonization, philosophies like communalism, capitalism, socialism, etc. Their forms and effects in the society. Their forms and effects in the society. Normally, how UPSC used to ask questions from this trend is, out of the 7 questions or 6 questions, out of the 7 questions or 6 questions that is there in your history, there will be 6 questions from this and 1 questions from world history. If there are 7 questions, 6 questions will be from Indian heritage and culture, 1 question will be world history, which means they never go beyond 1 question. Look at all the past 8-year papers, they never go. At max, they can ask 1 question, or there are some instances where they didn't ask even 1 question. So 0 questions are also asked in the so-called history of the world. This is the first thing that I wanted to say. Now, what is the trend today that UPSC has followed in this exam? This is 2022 paper, history questions. As I said, the first 3 questions are from history. The next 3 questions, 11, 12, 13 are also from history. So let's quickly deal with the first component, how the questions are being framed here. Now, first question, how will you explain that medieval Indian temples sculptures represent the social life of those days? Now, one thing is, from the cultural concept, they are asking social aspects. How temple architecture is representing social life of these days. Now, this is something which UPSC has started in 2018. The trend of asking literature, architecture with social life is something that UPSC has started asking. As a result, for example, how rock cut architecture has been inspired from the so-called social life of those days, right? These type of things. So more or less, this is an expected question, right? We have some substantial answers to write. The second one is, why did the armies of the British East India Company, mostly comprising of Indian soldiers, win consistently against the most numerous and better equipped armies of the then Indian rulers? Give reasons. Now, this is something about freedom struggle, right? Freedom struggle. The question is from here. The first question is from here. The second question is this one. Modern Indian history, right? The question was asked. Again, a very simple question with substantial knowledge of Indian freedom movement. With prelims knowledge itself, you can answer these 2 questions. Look at the third question. Why was there a sudden spurt in famines in colonial India since the mid 18th century? Give reasons. Again, they are asking about the so-called events that has taken part in the middle 18th century. So the first 3 questions more or less is freedom struggle, these 3. So they are asking why there was a sudden famine in the colonial India since mid 18th century. Obviously, you can write various reasons. The lack of agriculture, the lack of industries, the lack of proper food, right? So there was, it is said that pre-British famines were natural, post-British famines were man-made, or British time famines were man-made. Again, all these 3 questions are repetitive questions. If you have looked at previous year questions substantially from the so-called 2000 onwards, you can write these things. A little or basic knowledge of history is necessary to solve these answers. Look at the 15 marker questions. 3 15 marker questions were asked. 3 15 marker questions were asked here. 11, 12, 13. The 11th one. The political and administrative reorganization of states and territories has been continuous ongoing process since the mid 19th century. Discuss with examples. Now look at this. Political and administrative reorganization of states has been happening from mid of the 19th century. Now I'll hold this. I'll come to this question. Let's go to 12th question first. Discuss the main contribution of Gupta period and Chola period to the Indian heritage. Very simple question. Many of us who studies prelims, Guptan architecture, Cholan architecture, these are very important. Very simple question again from the art and architecture component. Now this is something a bit difficult. 13. Discuss the significance of the lion and the bull figures in Indian mythology, art and architecture. How lion and bull are important, right? What? So how you can write this answer. Maybe we might not have studied this in history component because none of us studies to this extent why a capital is made up of lion, bull, horse, right? We don't study to that extent. However, how to write these type of questions, this is the first time that UPSC has asked in this direction. How to remember the answer or how you can get the answer is look at the characteristics of a lion, look at the characteristics of a bull, and then reflect it to the social elements that were present at that point of time. Then you can get some inputs to write this answer. I say maybe not for 15 marker, at least we can substantiate with these type of analogies up to 10 marker answer at least, right? So except this question, the rest of the questions are expected. The rest of the questions are inline and very easy. The basic prelims knowledge is more than enough to solve these questions. Coming to the 11th question. Before going into the 11th question, they are asking territorial reorganization of the states and territories, and they didn't give the context. They didn't give whether they are speaking about world or they are speaking about the so-called this one, reorganization within the country. Because in the history, there are two things: redrawal of national boundaries. In the West, you say it as redrawal of the so-called nation-state borders or boundaries, right? So this is one thing, and reorganization within the country, post-reorganization. Now, if you look at the question, they have not exactly said the political and administrative reorganization of the states and territories has been continuous ongoing process since mid-19th century. Now, they didn't tell you, is it Indian context or it is world context? Because from the mid of the 19th century means you can expect it from the 1850s. Even in the world history, redrawal of national boundaries from 18th century is present, which means from 1700 to it has happened until the so-called 1940s or 1950s. So this is one question where we might get stuck whether to write the answer of Indian context or whether to write the answer of world context. So what would be the better way when they have not given these things? Discuss with examples. Now they asked us to discuss with examples. So you can start with Indian context and you can give references to the world also. How the reorganization of Germany has happened, Italy, unification of Italy has happened. So these type of examples along with the Indian context would have solved the problem. But even if you have written in the Indian context also, that is completely fine, because in the Indian context itself, you can substantiate these answers. The second reason is, as UPSC has asked only 6 questions, not 7 questions from history, the 7th question used to be the world history one. As a result, if you have written just Indian context answer here, then that is completely fine. Because when UPSC used to ask 7 questions from history, the 7th question used to be from world history, which means in this paper, if you have written just that from this answer from Indian context, then you can consider that world history question is not present. The same thing has done in 2020 also. In 2020, there was no world history question. In 2021, there was world history question. In 2022, again, more or less, there is no direct reference to world history questions. So this is the questions. Now look at the directives that they have asked. In the first 3 things, how will you explain? Which means they are asking you to explain the relation. So the directive is explain. The second directive is again why and why. So whenever the term question comes with why, they ask you to give reasons. So which means you have to substantiate your answer. The first one is how and the second one is why. Which means here and here you have to give illustrations. Right? Very simple answer. Just by quoting some illustrations from various pages, you can write that. And here, all the questions were with one directive, that is called discuss. Right? Whenever you are discussing, you just discuss the characteristics, no need for critical analysis at all. So if you look at all the questions in history in 2022 paper, they were very plain, with very plain directives and direct questions. The only one place where we might stuck is at the 11th question, whether to write this in Indian context or world context, but again the choice is given to you by UPSC, which means what do I mean to say from history? There are 6 questions which were asked. All are easy, and with a little, if you have prepared for prelims itself properly, your prelims knowledge will be sufficient to write these answers, provided that you have studied world history. Now, when it comes to world history, if you look at the syllabus of world history, they have given almost 6 or 7 subtopics. Now, for that, they will ask one question. So, if you look at the worthiness of the time that you are keeping, is it wise to go now or not? What I say is, if you have not started world history, this is better to hold on. It is not going to add much weightage. First, complete some other sets which are very, very important for your history. So, never bother about world history as such. If you have not studied also, we can manage it at some point of time down the line when you people are writing the so-called names, right? This is the first thing that I wanted to say. So all the questions of history are very easy compared to 2021 and 2020. This year, history questions are very, very easy, right? Let me enter into the so-called the next point, that is called geography. If you look, this is the syllabus of geography that we have, right? Salient features of world physical geography, distribution of key natural resources. Every year there will be one question from key natural resources. Location of industries, every year there will be one question. Important geophysical phenomena such as earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanoes, which means geography in context of disaster management. This I call it as ecological geography or environmental geography. The last one is geographical features, locations change. Again, this comes under environment. The first 2 things are environment, economical geography. The last 2 things are ecological geography. The first one is normal geography, right? Every year the questions will be rotated with a combination. If you look at 2021 paper, they have combined with pure economy and geography. They have combined with pure environment with the so-called geography. So what do I mean to say? I mean to say that in the geography questions, whenever you are trying to answer a geographical question, you should understand these questions not just from plain geography, but from something called ecological perspective of geography, environmental perspective of geography. How? Let me explain you through this paper itself. Look at the 4th question. Discuss the characteristics or describe the characteristics and types of primary rocks. So this is pure geography, rocks on rock systems, right? Many of us study this in prelims, or many of us leave this type of studying also in prelims. So if you know basic rocks, types of rocks, at least if you don't know exactly what are primary rocks, at least if you know the knowledge that yes, I have studied something about rocks, I can manage. So 4th question is purely geography. Yes, I consider this as a bit easy. The reason is everyone might be knowing at least some form of rocks, sedimentary rocks, igneous rocks, metamorphic rocks, and then they might have written some characteristics about it. So again, a very simple question. Look at the 5th question. Discuss the meaning of color-coded weather warnings for cyclone-prone areas given by the Indian Meteorological Department. Color-coded weather warning system for cyclones. This is something out of context. Out of context in the sense we don't prepare it prior, right? Where we study this is, we study these things in the so-called environment. In the ecology and environment, we study air quality index, national ambient air quality index, right? In these 2 things, we study about air quality index. But when it comes to cyclones, now they are not asking about air, they are asking about cyclones, weather coating system or color coating system. This is something which we don't expect to prepare much earlier, right? So maybe you might have prepared about cyclones, but not this thing called how Indian Meteorological Department gives this type of color-coded systems. So what I say is, this is something out of blue question. Among all this, so for what we discussed, this is the first question which I consider that is out of blue. The 6th question, discuss the natural resources potentials of Deccan Trap. Now they are asking what are the resources that are present in the Deccan Trap. Now again, this is geographical question because I said this is directly from the so-called key natural resources across the world and India. Right? So they have asked it. One question is from the so-called rock system. The second question is from natural resources. The third question is from the cyclones. They asked color coding system. Now again, sixth one is very easy. At least you should have studied some basic physiological geography, physiogeography. When you are studying about some Deccan traps, you might be knowing what are the resource potential that it has, what is the type of rocks that it has, what is the types of soils that it has, and what type of crop systems or cropping systems do come out in these Deccan traps, right? We study this again in prelims along with this, right? Look at 7th. Examine the potential of wind energy in India and explain the reasons for their limited spatial spread. Now in geography, from 2017 onwards, UPSC started giving renewable energy sources. For example, at times they ask solar energy, at times they ask wind energy. Now they have in the last year, they have asked about solar energy and they have asked how India has potential. Now they are asking about wind energy potential, which means, again, this is very simple. Examine the potential of wind energy in India. Why it is simple? We studied this in the environmental component, not here. So whenever you are studying geography, always remember that we have to link certain aspects of environment and it has to be linked to this section. So again, we can manage. I don't say that we can write the best answer. At least we can be able to manage 4, 6 and 7 questions. At max, the difficulty will be with 5th question. So these are the 4 questions in 10 marker. The next 4 questions are in 50 marker from geography. What are the forces that influence ocean currents? Describe their role in fishing industry of the world. Very simple question for 15 markers. Cold ocean currents, warm ocean currents, right? The meeting point of cold ocean currents and warm ocean currents, you can write substantially by drawing a beautiful diagram of the map of the ocean currents and then showing that what are the major fishing grounds and how they are playing a crucial role. You can also write how El Nino and La Nino are going to change this cycle, right? So this thing, a very simple question directly from the prelims, a very easy question. 15th. Describing the distribution of rubber production industries, indicate the major environmental issues faced by them. I said every year you will have one type of cropping system or one type of industry which is located in a particular locality. They will ask you to explain about that system. Now this is that system which is being asked here. What is that they are asking? They are asking you about rubber industries or rubber plantation industries. Now, how we can visualize this answer? This answer can be studied only with prior preparation itself. How? Majority of us don't study for prelims about the industries, but what I recommend is this year, as you have substantial amount of time for preparation of prelims, prepare this component for the prelims itself, in geography itself. So they will ask some industries like rubber industries, steel industries, coal industries, right, iron and steel industries. So these type of industries will be asked, natural gas industries. So they are also asking about rubber. Now how I classify this is an easy question because this was previous year question. This is previous year question. Directly they have picked up from the previous year question. So at times they ask palm oil, at times they ask rubber. So these things is important. But the second component, environmental issues faced by them, is something which we feel difficult to understand unless and until you know what are the areas where these rubber plants are being grown. We can imagine the scenario. If we know that area, okay, rubber plants are grown in this area, we can analyze about what are the changes that are happening in this area and then you can derive some answer. I don't say that you will have a pre-defined answer, but you can derive an answer for this. This is 15th question. Look at 16th. Mention the significance of straits and isthmus in international trade. A very easy component, straits and isthmus, right, in international trade, right? Why it is very important or very easy? Because when you are studying geography, you start with this straits, you start with isthmus, right, straits and isthmus, and then you can write some examples and you can say how they are going to play a very crucial role in international trade. Write about Suez Canal, right? Earlier there was no Suez Canal, right? Suez Canal used to be the strait which used to connect the so-called Mediterranean Sea with the so-called Red Sea, but earlier it was not present. As a result, the trade has to cross through the so-called the South Africa and then come to the so-called the eastern part of the world, right? You can write these things. bearings. You can write many examples, many straits that you study, many isthmus that you study. Just like 14th question, this question is a very simple question. With your basic knowledge, you can attempt this question. 17th, troposphere is a very significant atmospheric layer and it determines weather processes. How? Good question. Troposphere is a very significant atmospheric layer. It determines weather processes. Now we study in the so-called at climatology. We study about various spheres of the Earth, right? Troposphere, stratosphere, mesosphere, thermosphere, and we study the characteristics of troposphere. But now, how it is determining the weather process is something that you have to derive. Most probably, it is some subjective analysis, right? Now, how it helps in bringing the so-called rains, how it helps in wearing the so-called sunlight. You have to write about this. This requires some subjective analysis. What is that subjective analysis? You should know what is this impact of as we move up, the temperature is going to fall down, and once we cross the layer of troposphere, the temperature is going to increase. As a result, the vertical movement of air doesn't reach to the so-called troposphere. As a result, it starts descending. Once it reaches the troposphere, as a result, there creates some conditions of instability, and that is going to add the so-called value to your rainfall, right? You can write these type of answers. So what does I mean by this? You require some subjective analysis to write this. You should understand exactly how the phenomena of rain occurs, how the phenomena of clouds occur, and how troposphere is playing a crucial role. I don't say again you will have content for 250 words, but you have to manage at least by writing some drawing some diagrams of some layers of the earth and showing that okay, after descending it starts falling down, and you can write some examples. You can also write something called about jet streams which are happening or which occur in these layers, right? So how they are playing a crucial role. So if you have knowledge about that, then you can manage this answer. So these are the 8 questions in geography that they have asked. Again, if you look at the questions that they have asked, in these 8 questions, 6 questions are well within our reach. 6 questions are well within our reach.